Dear students, I welcome you to this lecture. It is all about maturation and learning. Well, students, before going ahead, let us have a look at the objectives of the lecture. The objectives are understanding the nature of maturation, understanding what learning is all about, understanding how maturation is a factor of learning and how maturation and learning are interrelated. The connotation of maturation is much wider and comprehensive. It is the process by which we change, grow and develop throughout life. It refers to the natural unfolding of inherited tendencies. It refers to sequential characteristic of biological growth and development. The biological changes occur in sequential order and give children new abilities. The concept of maturation was pioneered by Arnold Gesell in the 1940s. He emphasizes the nature's role in human development. In developmental psychology, the concept of maturation was advanced by the Swiss biologist and psychologist Jean Piaget. For him, simply growing up played a crucial role in children's increasing capacity to understand their world, posing that children cannot undertake certain tasks until they are psychologically mature enough. Steiner and Solé refer maturation to the process of physical growth and development which does not depend on any opportunity to practice. It is a biological phenomenon which takes place within the individual. The American psychologist B.F. Skinner is of the opinion those changes that are associated with normal growth are called maturation. Such behavior occurs apart from any specific stimulation from the environment. Thus, maturational changes are the results of unfolding and ripening of inherited traits and are relatively independent of activity, practice or experience. In the words of Beatty and Hunt, maturation is a developmental process within which a person from time to time manifests different traits, the blueprints of which have been carried in his cells from the time of his conception. In this way, maturation involves changes that are associated with the normal growth of a person. Changes in the brain and nervous system account largely for maturation. These changes in the brain and nervous system help children to improve in thinking, that is, in their cognition, and motor, that is, their physical skills. Also, children must mature to a certain point before they can progress to new skills. For example, a 4-month-old cannot use language because the infant's brain has not matured enough to allow the child to talk. By 2 years old, the brain develops further, and with the help from others, the child will have the capacity to say and understand words. Also, a child can't write or draw until he has developed the motor control to hold a pencil or crayon. An infant is able to sit with support at the age of 4 months, sit without support at the age of 6 months, utter the first word in about 12 months, stand with support at the age of 10 months, and so on. No special training is needed to perform such activities. Maturational patterns are innate, that is, genetically programmed. A child's environment and the learning that occurs as a result of the child's experiences largely determine whether the child will reach optimal development. A stimulating environment and varied experiences allow a child to develop to his or her potential. Learning. Learning can be defined as the relatively permanent change in an individual's behavior or capability as a result of experience or practice. This could be explained that learning is an event that takes place within a person after experiencing another event, and this experience produces a relatively permanent change. It is an enduring change to behavior or in the capacity to behave in a given fashion, which results from practice or other forms of experience. It can be deduced that in learning, three things are present, namely change, permanence, and the result of experience or practice. These three are the events that constitute learning. In fact, the three basic criteria for what would constitute learning are change, endurance over time, and consequence of experience. Hilgard, in his book Theories of Learning, says learning is the process by which an activity originates or is changed through reacting to an encountered situation, provided that the characteristics of the changes in activity cannot be explained on the basis of native responses, tendencies, maturation, or temporary states of the organism, for example, fatigue or drugs, etc. Kimball too is of the opinion that learning is a relatively permanent change in behavioral potentiality that occurs as a result of reinforced practice. Changes in the behavior are other factors not always brought and controlled by learning only. There are other factors like fatigue, drugs, illness, and maturation, etc., which produce behavioral changes. But the behavioral changes brought about by these factors are purely transitory in nature, whereas the changes produced by learning through experience and training are relatively more enduring and stable. To cite a simple example, a person experienced pain after burning self touching a hot pot learns not to touch a pot again when it is hot. In a classroom setting, a learner learns through series of events such as reading, exercises, quizzes, exams, projects, and so on that are given to students. In case of maturation, modification of behavior does not result from experience, it is independent of experience. It takes place automatically with the normal growth of an individual. Therefore, if the behavior matures through regular stages irrespective of practice and training, the behavior is said to be developed through maturation and not through learning. On this ground, child scrawling, walking, or the flying of birds are the attributes of maturation primarily. However, through practice and training, the behavior is strengthened and improved upon with the passage of time. Maturation and learning interrelationship. Maturation is an important factor that affects our learning, is defined as growth that proceeds regularly within a wide range of environmental conditions. Maturation is growth that takes place regularly in an individual without special condition of stimulation such as training and practice. Learning is possible only when a certain stage of maturation is also reached. Exercise and training becomes fruitful only when a certain stage of maturation is attained. Maturation determines the readiness of the child for learning. Learning will be ineffective if the child has not attained the required level of maturity. There are individual differences in maturation. This means that the rate of maturation varies with individual. There are individual differences in the capacity to learn at the same age level. This is because of the difference of maturation level. Specific skills are learned by children easily who mature earlier than others. The 3 R's, that is, reading, writing, and reckoning, can be learned only after the maturation of muscular and brain capacities. Rate of learning ability is closely related to the maturation of the cerebral cortex. Deterioration of cortical tissues in old age brings about decline in the learning ability. So, it can be said that learning is not independent of maturation, but must be based upon a sufficient stage of growth. Learning is possible only when a certain stage of maturation is reached. However, much we practice a 6-month-old child with walking exercises, the infant cannot walk. The muscles have not matured enough for the infant to learn to walk. This particular learning is possible only when the nerves and the muscles have attained a particular stage of maturity and development. Practice is more productive when properly articulated with maturational level. It is very essential for the teachers to know the maturation level of the pupils. There is no denying the fact that maturation and learning are complementary. Maturation does not function in isolation. It is intertwined with the process of learning. One could speak, write, sing, or perform a host of activities not by mere maturation, but by a conscious, deliberate, purposeful, goal-directed behavior known as learning. While maturation emphasizes the influences of variables that are internal to the organism, learning always results from an interaction with environmental conditions, internal as well as external. Learning refers to changes in performance as a function of practice. One has to practice cycling, typing, swimming, singing, speaking, writing to learn. Maturation and learning are closely interrelated in the growth and development process. It is futile to attempt complete separation. Both are vital for the normal psychological development of a man. Some psychologists are of the opinion that a child's behavior is influenced much less by learning than by maturation. Others overemphasize learning at the expense of maturation. Maturation prepares the way for learning. Each step in maturation enables the child to conduct new activities in which learning takes place. When the baby's teeth, for example, come through maturation, he starts biting and chewing, and it's learning. Consideration of maturation of the child's brain is necessary before he can learn the complicated skills of walking. Maturation is an important variable for psychological study because it determines the limits of one's achievement. It also determines the rate of learning. Knowledge of this developmental process helps parents, teachers, and others to the desirability of adapting learning situations so that they are optimal in difficulty and complexity for the individual child. Educational principles. McGraw, the author of The Neuromuscular Maturation of the Human Infant, presented a theoretical framework for infant maturation. On the basis of his research, he believed that certain educational principles flow either directly or indirectly from the generalizations. Number 1, normally expected training in particular activity before the neural mechanisms have reached a certain state of readiness is futile. Number 2, exercise of a newly developing function is inherent in the process of growth, and if ample opportunity is afforded at the proper time, specific achievements can be advanced beyond the stage normally expected. Number 3, maturation and learning are not different processes, merely different facets of the fundamental processes of growth. Evidence that a child is ready for a particular educational subject is to be found in certain behavior signals or behavior syndromes, which reflect the maturity of neural mechanisms. Dear students, now let us see how maturation and learning can be differed from each other. The primary difference between maturation and learning is that maturation takes place with time, while learning occurs when a person acquires knowledge or experience. Learning is brought about by experiences which are the external stimulus or environment initiated that produces change. On the other hand, maturation is the change brought about by biological growth and development. It does not require an external stimulus as it is normal occurrence, development within a person. Maturation is a reflexive process that is not influenced by the environment, but learning requires environmental influence. For example, we cannot make an infant understand simply because he has not acquired the appropriate maturity. People learn through formal and informal educational systems. In school, children acquire age-appropriate knowledge in various subjects from professional teachers. They also gain experiences in social and athletic settings that contribute to learning. While schools are structured chronologically, children are able to acquire and use knowledge at different rates. People mature physically, mentally, emotionally with age. Physical maturity is generally constant regardless of how much a person learns. People grow from childhood through adolescence. They also age or mature throughout life. Under typical circumstances and without disorders, all people mature mentally and emotionally. Another way to understand the difference is to note that people can have similar learning experiences, but different capacities to make use of the knowledge they have gained. In other words, the pace at which people mature can vary. One young adult may have the mental and emotional readiness to get a job and start a family immediately after college, while another may not. Whereas maturation results from biological growth and development, learning is psychological. Maturation is a natural occurrence that happens without our intervention. Learning happens with cognition through the individual's interaction with his physical and social environment. However, maturation and learning are complementary. As a person matures, his knowledge, skills, and attitudes also develop or grow. A child only learns basic things, but as the child grows, his level of understanding also increases, enabling him to learn more complex things. Now, let us go through some of the educational implications of the process of maturation and learning. Teachers should be aware about the relationship between learning and maturation as they closely influence each other. Yet they have their own distinction. Teachers must know the maturity and psychological capacity of the learner so that he or she can develop learning strategies and use materials appropriate to the learner's level of maturity. The classroom is composed of children with different level of maturity and capability. A child would be disappointed if the lessons given are beyond his or her age capacity. On the other hand, if inadequate is given, the chance to develop the child's potential is wasted. One example is the child's attention span. Children have short attention span that, if not considered in the teacher's teaching strategy, much of the lessons would go to waste. As teacher, you must know what level of maturity your students have to determine what appropriate materials, topics and how to deliver effective learning to your students. A teacher cannot expect a 3 to 4 year olds learn multiplication as their brain has not reached maturity for that level yet. However, they enjoy learning using games, music and stories, etc. A teacher may be having a heterogeneous type of students who are in different age range in one class, ranging from 3 to 6 years. Those who are older can draw, know different shapes and know alphabets and numbers, while the 3-year-old kids, I could expect them crying, walking around during class, and they have even lesser attention span as compared to 5 to 6-year-olds. A teacher who understands the role of maturation in learning knows and expects this behavior to happen and will plan how to deal with these circumstances. Failing to recognize the level of this relationship, that is the relationship between learning and maturation, results to students being unproductive. Dear students, it was all for today, hoping that you might have understood the lesson and enjoyed it. Thanks.